So welcome everyone to IVA 614 Global Marketing. This will be our third session. And in today's session, we will be looking at global market segmentation, targeting, and positioning, also referred to as the STP process. Now, it is important as global marketers to be able to look into this issue of market segmentation, targeting, and positioning, given that the consumer group that we have determines the kind of strategy that we put out to be able to meet the needs of the said consumer group. Now, you all bear with me that various organizations have different kinds of consumers that they target, depending on the kinds of products and services that they offer. So as global marketers, it is important for us to be able to understand the STP process as it relates to segmenting the myriad customers we have at our disposal as global marketing institutions or firms, and being able to target them appropriately, as well as positioning ourselves such that in relation to the other competitors in our sector or industry who are also offering similar products and services, we will end up hopefully being the preferred choice to our target audience. So generally, that is what we are going to be capturing in today's session regarding the STP process. Now, as usual, there are certain learning outcomes we hope to achieve by the end of the session. And there's 4 of them for this particular session. The first one being to be able to identify the variables that global marketers can use to segment global markets. And then to also be able to explain the criteria that global marketers use to choose specific markets to target. And then to also compare and contrast the 3 main target market strategy options that are available to global marketers. And then to also be able to describe the various positioning options available to global marketers. So with that, let's begin today's session. We will start from a discussion on global market segmentation. Now, why global market segmentation? When we talk about global market segmentation, we are simply referring to the process of identifying specific market segments. Like I said in the beginning, we have a huge number of customers available to us, both within our domestic confines and all across the globe. Now, each of these customers has a unique set of characteristics that make them distinguishable from each other. So the process of global market segmentation is basically trying to identify specific segments within these myriad groups of customers that we are referring to. So we may either consider them in terms of country groups or individual consumer groups. In the case of global marketing, the focus will be more of individual consumer groups within specific countries or regions, or geographic locations outside of our own domestic or home country, following from the discussions we've had in previous sessions, right? So by identifying these specific segments, the global marketer is trying to look at which of these customer segments are a potential segment that they could serve. And before we can put a group of customers, be it an individual group or a country group or a regional group, into a segment, they need to possess certain homogeneous attributes. Homogeneous attributes in the sense that they need to possess certain attributes that they all share in common. And with the possession of these homogeneous attributes will come similar responses to the global marketing tactics that we use to try to reach them, to sell our products and services to them. So segmentation is important in the sense that resources are not unlimited. Firms always have limitations with regard to the resources that they have at their disposal. And the allocation of these resources by nature make it difficult for firms, particularly global marketing firms, to target every single customer in every single country or geographic region outside of the home country, right? So the idea is for the global marketer to identify specific consumers in different locations who share similar needs and desires or attributes, if you may, and exhibit similar responses which they can effectively target given the resource constraints that they have. Hence the need for global market segmentation. So still on the issue of global market segmentation, we are saying that global marketers must determine whether to adopt a standardized or adapted marketing mix to best serve their consumers. And we are saying this because remember in the beginning in explaining global market segmentation, we said that these customers that are placed in segments have to share certain attributes in common and they have to exhibit similar responses. Now, depending on the markets that the organization chooses to target by way of global marketing, they may have to adapt their marketing mix strategy. So the more homogeneous the segment is, the more standardized the global marketing mix strategy can be. And the more heterogeneous the market is, being the more differences they can exhibit, or the more differences that the firm identifies across these market groups, determines the level of adaptation that the global marketer will bring to the marketing mix. So segmentation is very important in as much as it determines the core or the foundation of the global marketing mix strategy that is designed by the global marketer to be able to target them. So by segmenting the market, global marketers can specifically delve deeper into particular segments that they know they can effectively target given their resource constraints. Because like we've already mentioned, the resources are not unlimited. Therefore, the organization cannot afford to spread themselves thin, wasting resources across segments that they cannot guarantee success in. So through segmentation, a firm will to a large extent be able to determine specific segments that they can to some extent guarantee a certain degree of success. And based on that, they can be able to generate deeper insights into the characteristics of these segments and what approaches to use to effectively target them in order to achieve their global marketing objectives. So to be able to segment the market, based on global marketing theory, there are certain variables or criteria that the firm can use as a basis for performing this segmentation. Now, as we will identify, there are a number of these criteria that are identified individually. However, it is important to note that even though these variables are specifically explained independently, firms cannot apply these variables independently or uniquely in targeting any particular market segment. And this is because consumers by nature are complex. And therefore, one particular variable will not be enough for the marketer to be able to develop an effective enough strategy to be able to target them. So when it comes to global market segmentation, there are 5 main variables or 5 main types of segmentation that global marketers can apply, starting from geographic segmentation, which is the most popular and most commonly applied. Then we have demographic segmentation, psychographic segmentation, which is based on the values, attitudes, and personality traits of these consumer groups, and then behavioral segmentation, along with the benefits sought segmentation. Now, like I mentioned earlier, I'm going to emphasize again, these segmentation criteria are explained independently. However, for a firm to be able to develop a strategy that is competitive enough and unique enough to be able to stand out against the competition and effectively target market segments to attain profitability, they need to find some kind of unique combination of these attributes, be it 2 of them or 3 of them or 4 of them or all of them, which I have rarely seen being done. However, I've seen applications of 2 or 3 of them being employed by organizations to be able to develop unique strategies that they believe will make them competitive in the global marketplace. Now, depending on the combination of these segmentation variables that are used, a firm can be able to classify the nature of segmentation that they are applying. So for instance, if a firm is applying a combination of geographic and demographic segmentation, they would combine the names of the two and perhaps refer to it as a geodemographic segmentation tactic. Please, I hope that makes sense.
Yes, it does.
Good. So the same goes for all the other combinations. For instance, if it is a psychographic and a demographic segmentation criterion that they are using together, they could say it is a psychodemographic segmentation criterion, and so on and so forth, depending on which variables they are mixing and matching. So now let's go into an explanation of each of the individual variables or types of segmentation that global marketers can utilize, starting from geographic segmentation. So like I said, geographic segmentation is the most popular and most commonly used one. And this involves dividing the world or the globe into geographic subgroups, right? Depending on, like I mentioned, the situation of the organization and their resource constraints and how they can be able to effectively target these markets. So firms will often start from geographical areas that are in proximity to them, right? Now, given that a lot of firms operate in their home country region, being all the countries that are in direct geographic proximity to their home country, does not mean that automatically they are going to succeed in these markets. Let's bear in mind from our previous discussion, we mentioned various environmental factors, both micro and macro level factors that distinguish each of these individual countries from each other. So in as much as we are choosing as global marketers countries that are in close proximity to our own home country, we need to bear in mind that the proximity does not necessarily mean that they will share a lot of similarities with us as a home country. Again, given that there is geographic proximity between your home country and this particular country you want to enter into, does not mean that in terms of what we refer to as psychic distance, there are similarities between the two countries. So you need to bear in mind that even though there's geographic proximity, there are certain environmental factors or contextual issues that may make these markets different from yours. So it is important that even as much as you are going in for geographic segmentation, please take cognizance of the fact that the geographic proximity does not necessarily mean that this market you are selecting will be similar to your home country. And therefore, the same strategy you are using in your home country may not automatically work in this new market that you are trying to enter into. And this understanding has been applied by several organizations over the years, particularly those multinationals that are operating in so many different locations. A typical example is Unilever, right? Now, Unilever Global has divided the world into regions, which they target using specific offerings. So for instance, the Unilever Global strategy has divided the world or the global market in terms of geography into the African market, which includes Ghana and Nigeria. Then they have the Americas, which includes Brazil and the United States of America. Then they have Asia Pacific, which includes Australia and China. Then they have the European market, which includes France and the Netherlands. And then they have the Middle East, which includes Qatar and the United Arab Emirates. Now, this classification helps them to be able to appreciate the similarities between these countries within these regions and develop targeted marketing mix strategies to be able to serve them. So you realize that when you look at the different regional classifications, you see that in terms of similarity regarding characteristics, there are certain observable similarities between the countries that are put in specific regions. Do you notice that? Do you notice that? Good. So for instance, between Ghana and Nigeria, what are some of the similarities? Between Ghana and Nigeria, what are some of the similarities? Yes, Tara.
They're both English-speaking countries.
Exactly, both English-speaking, right? Very good, Tara.
Yes.
Elizabeth, your hand is up.
Yes, please. We have some food we eat in common.
Exactly. Very good, Elizabeth, right? So it goes back to the explanation I was trying to give earlier that even though you are looking at a particular type of segmentation, it does not mean that that segmentation criterion can be wholly applied to every country you are trying to target, because they may have differences in other regards. So you need to look at the markets that share the most in common. And in this case, we can see Unilever has expertly done that, even though they are going according to geography. And they have selected markets that share certain similarities in common to be able to develop this targeting strategy based on geographic regions, right? So that is it for geographic segmentation. Next, we can talk about demographic segmentation. And demographic segmentation, apart from geographic segmentation, is another very simple and common means by which organizations segment markets. So when we talk about demographic segmentation, we are basically looking at measurable population characteristics like age and income. Last week, we discussed income into detail, breaking down the different income classifications. Sarah, please, your hand is up.
Yes, I had a question actually about the geographic segmentation.
Please go ahead.
Just for clarification. So I know that sometimes some markets may be divided into, they'll put North Africa with the Middle East.
Exactly.
Would that be a good example as well?
Exactly.
Okay.
Because you realize that North Africa and the Middle East share a lot of characteristics in common, isn't it?
Yes, yes.
Good.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome, Tara. Okay, so on the issue of demographic segmentation, like I mentioned, these are based on measurable population characteristics like age and income, which we discussed a lot into detail last week when we were discussing the concept of the gross national product and the gross domestic product, and how it helps to be able to determine the economic situation in a particular market and helps firms to determine whether or not this market is attractive enough to even enter into. Apart from age and income, we can also talk about other demographic characteristics like gender, education level, religion, race, nationality. These are all demographic variables that can be considered when it comes to international marketing. Because when we are marketing in different markets across the globe, we tend to consider these basic segmentation criteria as the foundation or the starting point for dividing the market into distinct groups with similarities. So for instance, an organization entering into a particular market, depending on the product that they are selling, for instance, if they are into selling feminine products or feminine hygiene products, the first criterion they will use to segment the market will be what? This is a global firm selling feminine hygiene products. What's the first criterion they will use? Tara?
It would be gender.
It will be gender, right? So they'll break it down first based on gender. And then they will continue with the rest of the variables, depending on the nature of the feminine product, whether it is high-end, right, or regular. What will be the next criterion after gender? If it was a high-end feminine product, what will be the next criterion after gender? Priscilla?
Income level.
Income level, good, because they would want to see, okay, so which of the women in this particular market, what is the range of income? What is the range of their earning levels? That will help us to be able to determine which percentage of the population could even afford what we are trying to sell, right? So very good. These are some of the bases by which organizations go about making some of these decisions on which markets to enter and which ones not. But in this group, in recent times, based on current research, there is a very huge argument for the basis of most of these decisions on one particular criteria in this group, which is age group. Now, aside national income, age group is another very, very important factor that researchers are pushing for most organizations to consider, especially regarding the nature and structure of the global population and how many of these different consumers fall within the age group classifications, which can help firms to make more targeted decisions when they are deciding to market globally. Now, when it comes to age group as a criterion for market segmentation, there is one main theory that helps us in making this decision regarding which market to target. And that theory is referred to as the generational theory. Now, the basis of the generational theory is generational market segmentation, which is all about breaking down the market into different age cohorts, right? And then targeting them based on the age cohort that is most dominant in the country that you are trying to enter into and how it will contribute to your bottom line. So you realize that depending on the business that the organization is into or whatever product or service it is that they are selling, they will be targeting a particular age group or people within a particular age demographic. And therefore, the generational theory helps such firms to be able to look at the viable age cohorts and what their representation is like in these countries they are trying to enter into to help them better decide whether or not it is worth their while. So according to generational theory, consumers can be grouped into specific age cohorts based on the years that they were born. Now, the generational theory has been conceptualized differently by various authors. However, you realize that each of them places the various age cohorts in a particular age bracket, sometimes with a year difference of plus or minus 1. So whenever you are quoting a particular age cohort classification for generational theory, you need to be able to clearly tell us which author's classification you are using. And for the purposes of our session today, we will be using Garrick et al.'s classification from 2017. And based on their classification, the generational groups can be grouped into the following age cohorts. We have the Gen Alphas, also known as Generation Alpha, including those who were born from 2010 to date. Then we have the iGen or the Gen Z, also referred to as Generation Z, who were born between 1995 and 2009. Then we have the millennials, also known as Generation Y, who were born between 1980 and 1994. Now, these three generational groups are known as the tech generation, because from the millennials down to the Generation Alphas were all born in the era of technology and in the era of the internet. So their patterns of consumption in terms of products and services and information and how they respond to various marketing mix tactics are very different from those born prior to their era of technology, including the Generation X's, who were born from 1965 to 1979. And then we have the baby boomers, who were born from 1946 to 1964. And then we have the silent generation, who were born between 1925 and 1945. Now, prior to 1925, I don't believe any of those people are still alive. So there's no classification for them. However, when it comes to global marketing, because we are in the era of technology and we are in the era of digital, a lot of global marketers like to pay close attention to the tech generations, being the millennials, the Generation Z, and the Generation Alphas, especially where they are selling products that have to do with contemporary technologies, right? So all those organizations that are predominantly selling their products and services online via e-commerce would mostly target this group. All the people who are selling tech items, computers, cell phones, software, will always like to target these consumers, especially at the individual level in the B2C market. It's a different story when we come to the B2B market, where we are dealing with organizational consumers who have different consumption patterns, right? So these generational classifications help a lot of organizations to be able to determine who they want to target and how they want to target them, depending on the product and service that they are offering. And using these classifications from country to country, we can be able to determine the nature of the population by way of age. So for instance, when we go to a country like Japan, using these classifications, Japan has what we refer to as an aging population, because most of the population are between the baby boomer and Generation X group. So if you were an organization and you were trying to sell products and services to consumers in these markets, and you realize that, okay, Japan is among the countries that I'm targeting. However, based on the generational classification, most of the population is within these age groups. So does it mean that the product that I'm selling will attract their attention? Or will they even be interested in what I'm trying to sell based on their age group? Please, I hope what I'm saying makes sense.
Yes, it does.
Yes, it does.
Very clear.
Good. So effectively, generational theory combined with the other variables we talked about, like income and gender, right, help us to be able to determine the specific kind of customer that we want to reach with our market offering, and whether or not they will be able to afford what we are selling, to be able to purchase it, to result in profitability for us. So generational theory, aside income and gender, are three of the key variables when it comes to demographic segmentation that global marketers like to consider. Priscilla, please go ahead.
Thank you, Doc. You mentioned, so I'm just thinking, if I'm a tech company and I'm targeting the tech generation, I have most of them here, let's say being teenagers or probably not even working.
Yeah.
Right. Who depend on their parents, who
Good.
I may not be targeting. So, what would be the appropriate thing here? Because, these guys may not be able to afford.
Good. So, Priscilla, we have another classification that we use. Besides this, there are sub-levels of classification, and that help us to distinguish each group from the other. Now, we realize that a lot of the Gen Alpha and iGen or Gen Z, like you're saying, cannot afford, right? Especially when it comes to buying tech gadgets, which we know come with a hefty price tag. However, when you consider them in terms of income level, you realize that the iGen or Gen Z's parents are usually the Generation X, isn't it?
Yes.
Good. And then the millennials are usually the parents of the Generation Alphas.
Yes.
They have purchasing power, but they are not the decision makers. In this case, those who don't have the purchasing power are the decision makers. So you realize that as a global marketer, Priscilla, it's interesting, huh? This is strategy. So as a global marketer, for instance, if you are communicating or targeting, your communication will include messages that are meant for the decision maker, as well as the one with the purchasing power.
That's
so
true.
you're targeting the decision maker by telling the decision maker, this laptop I'm selling you can do this, can do that, can do this, can do that. And then you're also targeting the one with the income by saying, if you buy this for your kid, it's going to last 5 years. Your kid is going to excel in school. Your kid is going to be one of the top performers. Do you get it?
Yes.
Good. Nigel, good. Customer versus consumer. The consumer is not always the one with the purchasing power, right? Good. That is why it is very important to think about all these things together and not in isolation. Sarah, please go ahead. Priscilla, thank you for the question.
Thank you, Doc.
I just wanted to ask, for parents who are very maybe controlling, wouldn't they be decision makers as well, apart from just being the...
Good. That is why your communication cannot target just one group.
Okay.
It has to target everyone who is involved in making the final decision that results in the sale.
Okay.
So if your communication is out there, for the parents who control everything, your communication is targeting them. For the parents who don't control everything and allow the user to make the decision as well, their communication is there. So it's like you are hitting all your bases to ensure that you make the final sale.
Right, it's clear.
All right. Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Doc. Yeah.
All right, so that is it for the age-based groupings in terms of generational theory and how it's included in the top criteria for demographic segmentation, along with income and gender. Now, next, we can talk about psychographic segmentation. Now, psychographic segmentation is less popular and overt, even though it plays a key role in consumer decision-making as well as their responses to various marketing mix tactics. So when we talk about psychographic segmentation, we are basically referring to the values, attitudes, lifestyles, and personality traits of these individual consumers and how it influences their final decisions. Now, by being able to understand the values, personality traits, lifestyles, and attitudes of our consumers, we as global marketers can create better interactions with them, depending on the characteristics they exhibit along these different dimensions we have talked about, right? Which will help us be able to predict to a large extent how they will be able to understand and receive whatever communication or marketing mix tactic it is that we are using to reach them. So when it comes to psychographic segmentation, there are different forms of criteria that have been developed to help marketers achieve psychographic segmentation. However, there is a very popular one that has been used and is still being used by various organizations across the world. And this was developed by a marketing research institution known as SRI International. Now, SRI International is based in the United States of America, and they came up with this framework called the Values and Lifestyles Framework, right? Which can be expanded into values, attitudes, and lifestyles. Now, the short form of this framework is the Vals Framework, right? Which was developed into a whole program that individual organizations can use or go through to determine the values, attitudes, and lifestyles of the potential customers that they are trying to target with their market offering. So the SRI International Vows Framework was developed in 1978. However, it is still relevant to date based on the unique formulation of the framework and its efficacy in being able to break down different customer groups in a particular geographic region. Now, this Vows Framework has 8 distinct types of consumers that it can classify. And this classification is done using a combination of their primary motivations as well as the resources that they have at their disposal. And with this, Vals is able to classify 8 distinct types of consumer groups, namely innovators, thinkers, achievers, experiencers, believers, strivers, makers, and then we have survivors. Now, this classification is done based on a certain survey that was developed by the Vows program developers to help put the individual consumers into a particular group, depending on their responses to certain questions that are asked in terms of their resources relating to income, education, intelligence, among others. Their primary motivations are also tested. And by the end of the framework, the Vows program will be able to tell you which kind of consumer you are out of the 8 consumer types that are detailed here. Please, I hope that makes sense.
Yes.
Good. So when you go to the Vows website, which I'm going to take you there right now. Please, can you see the screen I'm sharing?
Yes, it's showing.
Yes, yes.
Good. So the website we are seeing now is Strategic Business Insights, which is a company of SRI International, right? And it is currently the arm that is deploying the Vows program across countries for various businesses and organizations. And you realize that, like I said, they run the Vows survey for different consumers in different locations, for different organizations, depending on what the organization is looking for, right? And how they want the Vows program to be deployed in terms of the objectives that they have for their global marketing, among others. So you realize that in the left-hand corner of the screen, we can see Vows for business, consulting and research, among others. However, the main reason why I brought us here is the Vows survey, which I said positions you as a consumer among one of the 8 types of consumers identified in terms of your psychographics based on the responses you give to the survey. So you can see the Take the Survey tab here, isn't it? So when you click on it, it will take you to the survey. Please, can we see the survey?
Yes, it's just open.
Awesome. So it has a number of questions, right? All the way down to question number 42. And you click submit after you are done, and it will tell you your position in terms of the program. If we decide to take the survey, it will be all of us inputting our view. So it will not be objective, isn't it?
That's right.
Yeah, but when you get the opportunity, the link is in the slides. Just go to the page and then take the survey and see what kind of consumer you are. I think it will be very interesting for you to be able to see where you fall in terms of the 8 categories that have been identified. So still on the issue of the Vows Framework, to reiterate the fact that the Vows program has been in existence and has been applied severally over the years, you will notice that the Vows Framework has been used to run the survey in different countries and different locations. When you click international vows, you can see that they have done international vows surveys for different countries. Currently, they've done it for only 6 countries. Please, I hope you can see that, including China,
yes,
the Dominican, Japan, Nigeria, the United Kingdom, and then Venezuela. Nigeria is the closest to us, so I think we should look at the Nigeria vows. Great. So as you can see, the Nigeria vows says that Nigeria vows segments adults in Nigeria into one of 9 consumer groups on the basis of primary motivation. So here it is just based on their motivations. And we can see that as the years have gone on, like I said, depending on the needs of the organization or the commissioner of the vows program, they are able to customize it to suit the needs of who the commissioner is and what objectives they are hoping to achieve. So you realize that in terms of motivation, they've been able to use the Vals framework to classify Nigerian consumers into different groups. Please, can we see that?
Yes.
So they have different groups starting from big man cynics. And the big man cynics are the ones who move to accumulate and preserve their status and power and to realize personal ambition. I think this is spot on.
I agree with you. So I
Very
just had a quick
typical of
question.
Nigerians.
Yeah, Tara, please go ahead.
So this was customized. Now I've noticed that just looking, if you could scroll up a little bit.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you. We have the traditionals, quiet achievers, facilitators, but none of these look similar to the 8 distinct types that you talked about before, the innovators, thinkers, makers. So is this a customized?
Type, this is customized because this one is only looking at primary motivations. Remember, the 8 distinct types were a combination of primary motivations and resources.
Okay.
Good.
Okay.
So this is just based on motivations.
All right. Thank you.
You're welcome, Tara. So aside the
in this case, if we were to look, if we were to look at, let's say, England, we looked at just the primary motivations, we would see similar categories for them.
Let's quickly.
The same middle class facilitators.
Yeah. Do you see that?
Okay. Yes, but I see some new ones as well. So now I see pragmatic rationals.
Exactly.
Okay, so that's also based again on their primary motivations.
Good. Which also tells us that each market is distinct, even though we are using some primary criterion to categorize them.
Okay.
So you realize that all the frameworks differ. And I think when you get the chance, you should sit down and peruse the different frameworks and see if it's really spot on. For me, I don't know about consumers in the other markets. I know about the Nigerian consumer. So when I saw it and I started going to it, I was like, this is actually spot on. And I realized some things too about the Nigerian consumer that I did not know. For instance, I didn't know that there were quiet achievers in Nigeria. I've always thought of Nigerians as big man, principled people, loud people, strivers, but I didn't know there were quiet achievers. And you notice that this is very unique.
It's for women here.
Yes, so and it's very symbolic of what is happening in Nigeria now, isn't it?
Yes.
There are a lot of very competent female achievers emerging in Nigeria, even internationally.
Very true.
Yeah. So this is spot on by saying that there are quiet achievers who are competent women who balance their personal achievement with family and community responsibilities. Like, I'm like, yes, this is currently what we are experiencing in the country. Thereby emphasizing the relevance of this framework that even though it was developed in 1978, its evolution is still making it relevant to date for the purposes of business decision making, right? So when you get the opportunity, please just visit the website. I've put the link in the slides and familiarize yourself with all the different categorizations from the different countries that they have done, and try and take the Vows survey and see where it will position you. I think it will be very interesting for some of us to find out the kind of consumers that we are.
And I think before I take it, I would probably select one that I think I am, and then see what the survey actually, the results actually say that you are. So
that'll be very interesting. Great. So we noticed that the Vals framework just looks at values, attitudes, and lifestyles, isn't it? However, when it comes to personality traits, there's a whole nother framework that we use to break down personality traits. And that is referred to as the 5-factor or the Big 5 model of personality. Now, this classifies personalities into 5 main groups. We have the openness personality types, the conscientiousness personality types, or those who are conscientious, those who are open, those who are extroverts, those who are agreeable, and then those who are neuroticists. Now, depending on your position, because you realize that each of the personality traits can be positioned along a continuum. So for instance, if we take extraversion, it ranges from the solitary or reserved person to the outgoing and energetic person. Please, can we see that?
Yes,
so,
yes, we can.
So when you pick each of the traits, you can position your consumers along the continuum to be able to see where they fall. Now, depending on the traits that the consumer has, it will give you an inkling as to how to go about formulating your strategy to be able to get their attention, or to be able to make sure that the marketing mix strategy that you formulate is one that will appeal to them and get them to give that response that you are looking for, right? So very quickly, let me share with you a typical example of the characteristics of individuals that fall within the different personality traits. Please, can we see the screen?
Yes, we can.
So when it comes to openness, this particular consumer is said to have the tendency to appreciate new art, new ideas, values, feelings, and behaviors, right? So that means that such a consumer is open to new things, isn't it? So it means if you are selling to this particular consumer, you do not have to think too much, because they are open to new ideas. They are open to new beliefs. So you are free to attempt to convince them, or to try to sell them whatever product or service it is that you are selling, even though they may not be familiar with it. And they will be open to receiving whatever communication that you have to give, right? Also, when we talk about conscientiousness, these are those who have a tendency to be careful. They are always on time for appointments, they follow the rules, and they are hardworking. So that means that when you are communicating to such a group, you need to emphasize these traits, depending on the product or service that you are selling. If it is a service, you need to emphasize how the service is going to help them to achieve this objective of being self-disciplined, of achievement, of being dutiful and orderly, among others, right? Then we can talk about the extraversion trait, which has to do with people who are talkative, sociable, and enjoy the company of others. So that means that in developing your marketing mix tactics, you need to focus on hammering these elements and how your product or service is going to contribute towards helping them achieve this level of sociability and gregariousness and excitement that they seek, right? Then we have the agreeableness criterion, which has to do with the tendency to go along with others rather than to assert their own opinions and choices. So that means that when you're communicating to such a group, you need to be able to make sure that your marketing mix tactics involve whatever reference group whose opinion they respect. Because we know that for the agreeableness criterion, they tend to go along with others rather than assert their own opinions. So if you are able to communicate with them using their reference groups, it's most likely that whatever you are telling them or trying to sell them, they will accept, given that it is coming from a source that they revere, right? Or a source that they trust. And then finally, we can talk about the neuroticism, which has to do with the tendency to frequently experience negative emotions, right? Like anger or worry or sadness. So this group are generally, most of the time, self-conscious, anxious, vulnerable. So in your marketing mix tactics to be able to reach this group, it's about making them feel less self-conscious. It's about making them feel less anxious and amplifying the aspects of your product or service that is going to help them achieve these objectives of being less vulnerable or making them feel empowered or making them happy and making them less anxious. Please, I hope that makes sense.
Yes, please.
Yes.
Good. So knowing the personality traits will to a long extent or to a large extent help you to be able to know how to craft particularly your communication and how to sell your product or service and which aspects of your product or service you need to be able to amplify to ensure that you can get the attention of this desired group that you intend to sell your product or service to. And that is with the element of the personality traits and how to use the Big Five model to decipher them among the customer base. So with that, we come to the end of psychographic segmentation. And we are moving on to behavior segmentation, or some people will call it behavioral segmentation. Now, behavior segmentation or behavioral segmentation focuses on whether the people purchase the product or not, how much of it they purchase, and how often they use it. Now, this to a large extent determines how you craft your communication, and even to a large extent determines the capacity with which you need to enter into this particular market. So for instance, when it comes to behavioral segmentation, consumers can be categorized into three main groups. The first category of behavioral segmentation is based on usage rate. You realize that for every product or service, some consumers are heavy users, others are medium users, others are light users, and then others are non-users. Now, depending on the nature of the market you are trying to enter into, you may want to scope it out to see, particularly in terms of the competition, which groups they are targeting. Perhaps the competition tends to focus mainly on the heavy users and the medium users to the neglect of the light users and the non-users. So that is the angle you would want to enter into the market from, where you are focusing on converting the non-users to become actual users of the product, and then perhaps focusing on light users to get them to move up to the higher levels of usage. Please, I hope that makes sense.
Yes, it does.
Good, right? So when it comes to usage rates, this is what we look into: heavy, medium, light, or non-user. And we can see this for various products and services in different categories. Depending on the category that you are considering, you will find different consumer groups that fit each of these user rates. And it's up to you to be able to determine which of the groups you want to focus on. Elizabeth, please come in.
Yes, Doc. So this behavior here is talking about the behavior towards the product or the service, and not that individual's behavior. No. That would fall under the demographic. Oh, sorry, that would fall under the psychographic.
Good, yes.
Okay, yes, thank you.
You're welcome, Elizabeth. All right. Now, apart from usage rates, we can also talk about usage occasion. And this looks at the habits and trends in terms of using a particular product or service. You realize that, and this is very common, at certain periods, depending on the season or the time of the year, certain products are in heavy demand. And at other times of the year, depending on the season or the period and under consideration, they are not in that much of heavy demand. For instance, when it's Valentine's Day or getting closer to Valentine's Day, we realize that certain products become heavily used. Examples include Tara, go ahead.
Oh, chocolate and lingerie.
Yes, Tara. Abner, please go ahead.
Hello, Doc.
Is that Emmanuel?
Yeah. Let me be safe and say chocolate.
Yeah, it's no more Valentine's Day, it's Chocolate Day.
That is in Ghana.
Yes.
Yes. So in terms of, so across the globe, it's still Valentine's Day. In Ghana, it's Chocolate Day.
Yes, yes.
Good.
Thank you.
You're welcome, Emmanuel. All right. Oh, there were several hands up. I had chocolate. Nigel, teddy bear, yeah. Kwame, we have to wear from drinks and rice. Drinks and rice are normal. Seriously, Nigel, flowers as well, yeah. Elikem, Uber services during Valentine. Please, can you explicate? Please clarify. Uber services. This is new to me. Elikem, please explain. How are Uber services heavily used during Valentine? Laura, can you laugh? Elikem, please explain.
Okay, Doc, so I was looking at you from the point where especially at the Valentine evening, where there are a lot of those who don't have cars usually usually take Uber to the restaurants and the hotels
and mischievous sessions.
Well noted, Elikem. Mariapa, please go ahead.
Mention red velvet cake.
Red velvet, yes, that's very true. I had that
red wine
2 years ago. There was a shortage. Red wine as well, Hilda, yes. Right, so these are general things that are heavily used. Hey, Elikem again, candles. Okay. So realize that, yes, Galaxy Tab A. Please, can you please make it your name so I can mention your name moving forward? But please go ahead.
Sorry, it's Priscilla. I changed the device. I think condoms too.
That's very, very true. In fact, that's a constant every year. Thank you very much. So these are products that you realize that on a normal day, people may be light to medium users of such products or services. However, when it gets to these occasions, you realize that the usage quickly jumps up from light to medium, all of a sudden to heavy, to the point where sometimes we experience shortages of such products or services on the market. right? So when it comes to usage occasion, we can be able to categorize different usage occasions for the products and services that we want to sell, depending on the market. So if you are in a market, depending on various environmental factors like culture, among the other factors we have talked about that may be specific to a particular context, certain products and services may have different usage rates depending on the occasion that we are considering, right? So that is it for usage occasion. We can also talk about user status, right? And this is very important to marketers because this helps us to be able to determine a clear gray area which we would want to address to give us a means of entering the market and doing so on a good note. So like I mentioned, some users may be non-users, meaning that they have not even attempted to try the product at all. Then we can have X users, people who were using a particular product and have stopped. Maybe because in that particular product category, they could not find a manufacturer who was manufacturing the product in the form that they liked. So they just stopped consuming that particular product altogether. We can also talk about potential users. These are people that, even though they are non-users and have not tried it before, have an inkling as to the potential of this product and how it can help satisfy their needs. So they are on the brink of making the final purchase decision. And here there's a great opportunity for the global marketer to target these particular consumers in different markets and get at them and motivate them to take the final plunge and make the purchase. Aside that, we have the regular users who are not very difficult to convince because they already know the product and what it can do. What you may have to do is to convince them about the efficacy of your brand of that particular product or service and why they should go ahead and purchase yours as against that of your competition. Then we have first-time users who have already made the decision to purchase, but they have not decided which brand to pick yet. Their marketers also have an opportunity to enter the market and allay the fears that a first-time user would usually have, pitching their product as the ideal for any first-time user who is purchasing a particular product or service in that category, right? And like I always say, as marketers, even at the global level, every consumer or user of a particular product or service belonging to your competitor is your potential client. Even though they are already purchasing the product or service of your competitor, they are still fair game. And it's about being able to come up with the right strategy that will be able to pry them away from your competitor and make them become a purchaser of your brand instead of that of your competition. And that is for user status. So when it comes to behavior segmentation, we can use the criteria of usage rates, usage occasion, as well as user status to be able to determine the behavior of consumers in respect of the products and services in our category and which group we will intend to target, depending on the resources that we have at our disposal and the strategy that the organization has agreed to proceed with. And with that, we come to the end of behavior segmentation. Yes, Priscilla, please go ahead.
Thanks, Doc. For the last point, that's the user status.
Yes.
Right. I want to ask about advocates. So sometimes, you know, you probably rely on the experience of people who have become advocates, you know, of your products to market to other, you know, users. Would they fall here under your regulars?
Yes, they'll fall under your regulars. Okay. They are a part of the regular group. But in the event that you are entering a new market where your regulars are not that many, you may have to look to other potential consumers in the other user groups. Priscilla, I hope that makes sense.
Yes.
And you also need to bear in mind that not all your regulars will be advocates. There may be some regulars good who would use the product, they are okay with it, but they do not feel like talking about the product, or they will not even recommend it to anybody. So we cannot leave any stone unturned in terms of formulating the strategy. We need to come from as many angles as we can to ensure that we make the most of the opportunity we have identified. Okay, Elizabeth, your hand is up.
Thank
you, Priscilla.
Yes, please. I wanted to ask that some people actually use the product probably because they don't have any other option.
Exactly.
Are they also part of the regulars?
Yes.
Okay.
So once you are able to identify this as an organization, you know the approach you are entering the market with. It is now about being able to what? Convince them that they do not have to settle anymore, because your product is going to give them what they are looking for. I hope that makes sense.
Yes, please.
That's why I ended by saying that even the current customers of your competitors are fair game, because it's about who can give the best value to the customer. And once you're able to convince the customer that you are offering the best value, they will definitely switch if what they are getting from the competitor is not exactly what they were looking for. Elizabeth, I hope that answers your question.
Yes, it does. Thank you.
You're welcome, Elizabeth. So that is it for behavior segmentation, right? The next, we can talk about benefit sort segmentation. And this is where global benefit segmentation is focusing on the numerator of the value equation. So when we talk about the value equation, it's all about how the consumer compares the benefits they are getting from a particular product or service with the price that they are paying. So the value of a product is the benefits that they are getting divided by the price that they are paying, right? This is putting it in simple terms. So as a global marketer, to be able to ensure that the consumer perceives value, it's all about making sure that you give them a benefit that is commensurate to the price that they are paying. Please, I hope that makes sense.
Yes, yes.
Please say that again.
To be able to ensure that the customer perceives value in what you are offering, be it a product or service, you need to make sure that whatever benefits you are giving them is commensurate to the price that you are charging them for that product or service.
Okay, thank you.
Good. So that means that comparing the benefits they are getting with the price, they should be able to see that, okay, this is fair. I know on several occasions, some of us have purchased certain products, sometimes at very exorbitant prices, and we have realized that the benefits we got from purchasing it was not up to the price that we paid. And perhaps an even cheaper option would have given us more benefits than that expensive one we bought. Yes, Tara.
So in that case, could you say that the benefit is subjective to the user?
Yes, very subjective.
Okay.
Depending on how they perceive the benefit price ratio. So what may be valuable to somebody may not be so valuable. I know a lot of people who do not see any value in the iPhone. Shocking, isn't it?
I agree with
very
you.
Shocking, very shocking.
They don't see any value in it. To them, it's overrated.
Oh, no.
And it's not because they can't afford. Some of them are even my own colleagues. It's not because they can't afford. They don't see value in it. Because the benefit compared to the price, they can get the same thing from an Infinix.
But
probably
is
they
there,
don't
is
know
there
much.
value really?
Probably they don't
is there
know
value
much.
really?
Yeah, it's one of them.
Yes.
He's asking if there's value really. Yeah, it
No,
depends
I
on
use
who
an
you
there
are.
is
iPhone,
value.
but is there value
There is
really?
so much value.
Yeah, it depends on who you are.
It's social value. Social value.
I'm on for the Tomamo. It's the most value.
Social value 50%.
Oh yeah, no. Oh, but there is so much value, honestly speaking.
As for
iPhones,
right?
I think
yes,
most people actually buy the used ones. And that is why I think they don't enjoy the full, package. But if you buy it brand new, the packages are just so much, and it's worth the money.
Yeah, but some people also buy it for different reasons. For some people,
no, can I ask you a question? Can I ask a question?
Yes, yeah, please go ahead.
It is just an aside. The ladies are just taking too much of the space. So let me ask Elizabeth the question. iPhone, the new one, did you buy it with your pocket money?
Oh yes, I did.
Okay.
My pocket money.
Okay. Thank you, Doc.
You're welcome.
I actually wanted to buy, so I saved for a while.
Exactly.
I saved because I bought one that was used, and I really wanted to buy a brand new one. So I
for
saved.
yourself.
Yes.
Exactly.
Yes.
Right. So for her, it's more of a psychographical thing, isn't it? It was a kind of achievement for you to save and buy your own.
Exactly.
Yeah. So that's where your value came from. For some people, it's a social symbol. If they are not having an iPhone, they are not slaying.
It's actually value for money for me.
Yeah,
honestly speaking.
For different people. I know a lot of professional photographers who do not own cameras. They do everything with the iPhone.
The value is even underrated for me sometimes.
They do video, they do their editing, everything using the iPhone.
Yes, you take a picture and it looks like you use the professional. And there are so many packages that come. You are able to use a lot of the things that people buy. You're able to use it for free for some time before you start paying for it.
Yeah.
So the value is there.
Yeah. So ultimately, I believe it depends on who you ask and the reason why they are going in for that particular brand. Right? So this approach of benefit sort segmentation is based on marketers' ability to have a superior understanding of the problem that the product is solving, right? So depending on who you ask, they may have a peculiar problem that that particular product is solving for them, right? As well as the benefits that that particular product or service offers to them, in addition to the issue that it addresses regardless of geography. So I remember several years ago when we started traveling outside the country, even before I did, and I had a lot of relatives who lived abroad, and they would always come home very often. And the main argument they would give is that they miss Ghana cooking, they miss Ghana food. And most of the time, when you ask them, it will be because, well, they didn't have kenke abroad, they couldn't do abenkwine, they couldn't do fufu. And because of that, they always look forward to coming to Ghana on the holidays to come and enjoy their abenkwine and their kukunte and their fufu. And this led to a revolution where some smart entrepreneurs in Ghana realized that there is a problem that needs to be solved. And this problem goes beyond geographic confines. So this was a global marketing issue. And this led to the birth of several global brands that help to serve the needs of the multitude of Ghanaians who live in different parts of the world and do not have access to Ghanaian food. Now, Nkulenu is a very popular one that produces a lot of these Ghanaian food items and exports them to foreign countries, right? So Nkulenu started doing the palm soup base, and then they upgraded to the one that includes prekese and abedru, because in Ghana here, people will usually go to their backyard where the abedru is growing, go and pluck from the tree, come and put it in the warmer and pound the abedru with the raw palm fruit that has been cooked. But they realized that people abroad wanted that specific taste, right? So they had to come up with a version that included the prekese and abedru taste. Then they realized that kenke was another essential commodity people couldn't get abroad. So what did they do? They started packaging kenke for sale abroad. And they made sure they took care of all the various ethnic groups, including Fanti kenke and Gan kenke. Then the Asantis also came in and realized that people need fufu. Before Need Fufu came, when we were living abroad, we used to use potato powder to make fufu. There were two kinds of potato powder that we used to combine. And when you cook it, the consistency is just like fufu. However, the taste is not like fufu, right? So that was what people were coping with until Neat Fufu came. The Neat Fufu opened the eyes of people to the possibility that fufu could actually be commercialized for people outside Ghana. And it started a revolution, and there were more brands of powdered fufu on the market. And before they became popular in Ghana, they were already popular in other countries. So you realize that there was a particular benefit that was being sought by different consumers in different markets, right? And this led to the identification of a problem that global marketers found a solution to and are to date making money off of, right? Elizabeth said it's a revolution indeed. I agree. But some men hate to see these products. Interesting. Tara, please go ahead.
I was actually going to talk about the benefit sort segmentation with the example you just gave about fufu.
Yeah.
Now, sometimes if you stayed abroad long enough and you got used to eating the neat fufu, you would now have changed like we're talking about the behavioral segmentation. I believe that this is something that could move you from a non-user or a light user to such a heavy user that even when you come back to Ghana, you may be now so used to the powdered fufu that even though you have access to the original one that would have been pounded, you may still opt for the neat. So that in itself is a combination of the strategies.
Exactly. Very good, Tara. Right? And in this case, that gives more money for the firm, isn't it?
Exactly. Yeah. Yes, both abroad and at home.
And exactly.
Even though they had planned on just capitalizing on the international market, now they are making some revenue from their home market as well.
Exactly. Right? Very good, Tara. And you realize that the variety is not stopping. Recently, they've launched Bofrot Puff Puff Mix. Who saw that one?
Yes,
I don't think I've seen that yet.
Right now, there's Bofrot Puff Puff. Yeah, celebrity Bofrot Puff Puff. Very soon they'll have all the varieties of Ghanaian food in this form, right? But even Puff Puff is now in commercially packaged instant mix powder form. But this is the concept that we are talking about here, where we are referring to how global marketers are intelligently identifying problems that require solution and finding marketable solutions to the problems and are benefiting from it profitably. In fact, I was surprised to find out that the product had already been launched abroad before they came to do the Ghanaian launch. So there are Ghanaians on YouTube who have filmed themselves abroad using the product, even before they came to do the celebrity launch in Ghana. So it goes back to what Tara said, that ultimately it will become something that will even trickle down from the international market to the local market, and it will become what is preferred. Okay, so that is it for benefit sort. Now that we have been able to establish the various criteria for segmenting, we need to move on to targeting market segments. Now, targeting market segments is important because, yes, Yao Mensah, please go ahead.
Thank you, Doc. I just want to understand, isn't such as a behavioral segmentation a sort of shifting sand to build a marketing campaign? Because behaviors change, and with the advent of technology, behaviors are changing pretty fast.
Yeah. But you know that a lot of this behavioral change is precipitated by marketing activity. We marketers have this gift of leading consumers to think and act a particular way and make them believe that they are doing it on their own. And it's an age-old tactic that marketers have been using. So you realize that you do not know you need the new iPhone until the launch date in September, when you see the new features that they've put in.
The reason why it has got no value and people think it has, because they are being led on. So I'm saying this because if at the very end, Ghana is quickly learning to become like the US, and working class women in this class are getting home late and they want to eat fufu, and they are now resorting to neat fufu instead of going to the market to buy yam because of convenience. Then that means behaviors would always change as the world is changing. And if you do a marketing campaign,
they will always change. And that's why the marketer will always have a job. And that is why the marketer has to be consistently studying their environment to monitor these changes and respond accordingly so that they can stay relevant and remain profitable. Yeah, please, I hope that is okay.
Yes, please. Thank you.
Awesome. All right. So we need to target markets because, like I mentioned, our resources are not unlimited. In segmentation, we can identify 1,000,001 segments, However, we need to be able to understand which of these segments are within our means that we can effectively reach with our marketing mix strategy to ensure that we are able to earn good profits for our organization. Now, when it comes to assessing market potential, we need to be able to understand some of the potential pitfalls that may happen when you are trying to target a market segment. For instance, there's a tendency for various global marketing organizations to overstate the size and short-term attractiveness of individual country markets. And that is often the result of limited research and their inability to be able to completely assess the situation in these markets with regard to particularly how profitable the market will be. Now, another problem is that shareholders or competitors sometimes exert pressure on various firms to make certain strategic moves in foreign countries, even when they know they are not ready. And because of that, marketers have to be very careful when it comes to opportunities that they see other competing firms taking advantage of that they believe they may be missing out on. Because you may target a segment not necessarily because you have the potential or ability to do so, but because your competition has made a move and you cannot afford to be a sitting duck. That's the wrong reason to target a particular segment. Also, you need to be able to ensure that the decision that you are making is based on in-depth and rigorous market analysis, and not just market analysis targeting the short term, but trying as much as possible to forecast and project into the future. Because it's not enough to see a market as being attractive in the short term. This profitability and attractiveness should be able to extend further into the long term, so that whatever resources you invest will be of benefit to you in earning profitability into the foreseeable future. So that whatever profit you earn will not be short-lived. Otherwise, the resources you invested, you will not be able to get the full benefits out of. So in respect of these potential pitfalls to segmentation that firms need to be cognizant of, when it comes to targeting, marketers need to utilize 3 basic criteria. The first one is to be able to ensure that when they are considering market attractiveness, they look at the market not just in terms of how attractive it is now in the short term, but in terms of its growth potential into the foreseeable future, where the investments they are making to benefit from this profitability in the short term will carry them through into the long term. Also, marketers need to be able to consider competition. Some segments may be very attractive. However, they will equally be attractive to other competitors as well. So where you see you are targeting a segment that has attracted the attention of other competition, and there's the likelihood that it can drown you out, it is better to reevaluate your options and choose a segment that you feel you can effectively compete without losing your initial investments. Also, global marketers need to look into company compatibility. And this goes back to the potential of competition and their ability to kick you out of the market, as well as the market's attractiveness. A market may be attractive, yes, but that does not mean that your company has the capability in terms of resources, among other things required to target this market, to be able to effectively do so. Likewise, your company may not be capable of competing effectively among the droves of competition that are also attracted to this particular market. So when it comes to targeting specific segments, firms need to consider these 3 criteria and make sure that they pay close attention when selecting a particular segment to target. Now, as we have discussed, in terms of market attractiveness, for instance, car manufacturers are now looking closely at the Indian market. And this was pre-COVID, right? Because India is currently the fastest growing car market in the world. And based on current projections, India is going to expand in terms of the sale of cars to about 3 million cars within a decade, being 10 years from when this research was published, which was somewhere in 2019. So if you are a car manufacturer and you're looking at market attractiveness, this is a prime market for you, because that means that it's not just attractive in the short term, but if you enter this market as a car manufacturer, you will be able to make good sales as far as the next decade, given the potential of growth in this market. Likewise, potential competition. You need to be able to look at the power of your competition and the ability to kick you out. Once upon a time in the United States market, Xerox was the #1 company when it came to copier machines, to the point where the name Xerox became synonymous with making a photocopy. Such that in the US, if you wanted to make a photocopy at that time, you would say you want to Xerox it. Then everyone knows that you're going to make a copy. However, Canon wanted to enter the market, and they saw a gray area that they could enter the market from. And that was because Xerox copier machines, even though they were very efficient, were all huge and not very compact. So they were difficult to move around and use, sometimes for individuals. So compact copiers were the means by which Canon chose to enter the copier market, by creating something that the regular people in the market were using because they didn't have any other option. So once Canon entered the market with the smaller, more compact versions of the copiers, consumers all of a sudden had multiple options to choose from. And organizations decided, okay, rather than buying a huge Xerox machine to serve their whole building, why don't we buy individual Canon copiers for each office? And that is how Canon was able to penetrate the copier market in the United States, right? Also in terms of, now this is a diagram that talks about the breakdown of potential competition as has been assessed using Porter's 5 forces, right? So Porter's 5 forces is a theory that helps us to be able to assess the potential threat of competition in a particular industry. Now, I know a number of us have heard about it before, haven't we? We've heard about Porter's 5 forces before.
Yes, we
Yeah,
have.
So looking at the potential of competition when it comes to global marketing, it's about looking at each of the dimensions of Porter's 5 forces and being able to decipher whether the threat in terms of each of the dimensions is high or low. And by the time you're able to complete this exercise, you'll be able to determine whether entering into this market, given the intensity of competition and your analysis, is advisable or not. And this diagram is a typical example of one such analysis done in the US paperboard manufacturing industry to guide any potential entrant into the market to understand the level of competition in order to decide whether or not it is the best decision to make at that point in time. So when you get the slides, you can look at it and look at the breakdown of the classifications and how each of it has been done to be able to determine whether or not it's a good idea for a firm to enter into this market, right? Good. Now on the issue of company capability, as we discussed, we need to look at whether the company is capable of taking advantage of the opportunities in these segments they have identified. And here we are looking at questions like, will adaptation be required? Because depending on your resources and your capabilities as a firm, adaptation may be more expensive than standardization. Standardization usually has to do with taking what you're already doing in your domestic market and replicating it in the foreign market. Whereas adaptation has to do with changing certain aspects of what you're already doing in your home country to suit the foreign market. And like I mentioned, it could become very costly when you are adapting a particular product or service for a foreign market. So you need to ask yourself if adaptation will be required for whatever product or service it is that you're trying to sell, and whether this adaptation is justifiable given your economic situation or your resource endowments and the expected sales volumes you are thinking about making in this new market. Also, you need to think about whether or not there are certain import restrictions or tariffs, along with other barriers that we discussed in our previous session, which you may have to invest significant resources to surmount. We talked about everything from lobbying to facilitation fees to appreciation fees. All of these could be either within or beyond the capability of you as an organization. And as we learned last session, depending on the assessment of the company's capabilities, the company may decide that this is beyond us, we can't do this, and will pull out completely. Or if they believe it is within their strengths, they will go in for it, right? So that is it for targeting. Now, once you have targeted, you now have to position yourself. Now, in terms of positioning, it is all about carving a niche for yourself in the mind of your consumer by creating certain unique associations between your product and service and whatever ideas that the consumer has in their mind. or certain contextual issues that are of relevance to the consumer, to ensure that when it comes to the purchase situation or the identification of a need that the consumer has to satisfy, based on the associations that your brand has in the mind of the consumer, your brand will always be the first to come up in their minds when they have a need for that product category. So in Ghana, for instance, let's do a typical quiz right now to be able to test this theory I've just put across. When I say toothpaste, what's the first brand that comes to your mind? Tara?
Pepsodent.
Because Pepsodent has managed to associate the concept of toothbrushing with their brand, so much so that the name of the brand has become synonymous to the category. When I say tea, what brand comes to mind?
Lipton.
Lipton.
Milo.
It depends on who you ask. Some people are not tea drinkers.
Drink is tea.
But how can Milo be?
Milo be tea.
Hey, to some people, Milo is tea. To some people, Milo is tea. I kid you not. To some people, Milo is tea. Let's do a last one. Dear Enwani.
Oh, club.
Yeah.
All the others pale in comparison to Cloud, isn't it?
Yeah.
So these are typical examples of brands in Ghana that have been able to create unique associations, such that it has become so popular that the brand name is synonymous to the category. And this is as a result of being able to identify the competition and being able to create distinctive points of parity and points of difference between your brand and those of other competitors, such that consumers can clearly distinguish your brand from the competition. And where brands succeed so much at doing this, they end up, in the cases we have just identified, becoming synonymous to the product category, right? So let's look at examples of these in the global environment. When we are positioning, for instance, some firms will choose to position based on their attributes or the benefits that they give. Others will also position themselves based on the quality that they give or the price of the product. For others, it is the way the product is used or the user of the product. And for others, they'll position themselves against the competition. And then for others, it's all about either the global consumer culture, the foreign consumer culture, and the local consumer culture, depending on the context in which they are operating. Tara, your hand is up. Is it from the previous one or you have a question?
Yeah, no, it's from the previous one. Sorry, I forgot to lower it. Okay.
All right. So when it comes to positioning, these are the 5 main tactics or strategies that you will see firms using, right? And we are going to break each of these down, starting from attributes or benefits. So here you realize that firms will often position themselves based on a particular attribute or benefits that their product or service offers, like economy or reliability or durability, like Polytank, as Elizabeth is saying, right? And Interplast. So in terms of attribute or benefit positioning, we can talk about brands like Volvo that are best known for what? What is the attribute that Volvo positions itself on?
Safety.
Safety, right? And it's synonymous with the brand. So when we talk safety in terms of automobiles, it's Volvo that comes to mind. On the other hand, brands like BMW are positioned as what? Ultimate driving machines.
Small boys cars.
However, when you mention a brand like Mercedes-Benz,
that one be car.
The best or nothing.
Thank you.
Comfort.
And that is the attributes that they have been known for and are consistently projecting, right? Elika, it depends on who you ask.
Don't worry.
Some people sit in Toyota and the others, they actually sleep in the Benz.
Yeah.
Right, and finally on attributes, we can also talk about brands like Visa that are known for being everywhere. So regardless of the country you go to around the world, if you can't use any card at all, you can use your Visa card. The only problem you might have is in terms of the charges. But apart from that, you are most likely to find a Visa POS or ATM somewhere that you can use. So these are just a few of the brands that position themselves based on attributes. We can also talk about brands that position themselves based on quality. And for some of them, it's about offering a high quality at a high price, or offering reasonable or acceptable quality at a reasonable price, right? So we can talk about the juxtaposition of NASCO, Media, and Samsung. You know, they are all owned by the same company.
Hey, is that
I didn't know that.
Wow.
So Samsung, NASCO, and Media are owned by the same company. NASCO and Media are positioned as the more affordable, reasonably priced brands under the umbrella, whereas Samsung is the high end of the three. But they are owned by the same company. Let me give you another one. Techno, Infinix, and itel are also owned by the same company called Transsion Holdings. Did you know that?
Nope, we didn't know that.
So Techno, Infinix, and itel are owned by Transsion Holdings. They are a Chinese company. And you realize that each of these brands are targeted at different groups of people. With Techno being of the three, the most high end, followed by Infinix and then itel, right? And each of them gives a certain level of quality, depending on the model you are buying, and then you pay a particular price. So these are all tactics that are used by global marketers, and a lot of them do it silently, such that, like we just realized, a lot of you didn't even know that Samsung owned both NASCO and Media. Right? Yes, Nigel, very interesting. These are all global marketing tactics that firms use on a daily basis. Right? So in terms of deciding where to position your brand, we have what we refer to as the customer value map, which helps firms to position their brands along what we refer to as the fair value line. So you realize that in the Samsung example, the Samsung brand will be placed at the position of the fair value line where we have what? Which position would Samsung
premium.
Be? Premium, good. And then NASCO and Media will be somewhere in between. Because the quality is not so bad. It's comparable to Samsung in several aspects.
Yes.
Right? So as a firm, you need to ask yourself, in terms of the different brands I'm offering in the different markets, where do I want each brand and the product offered under each brand to be positioned in terms of the fair value line? Because this is the only place you can position your products or services for it to make sense to sell to different customer segments in different markets, particularly if you are trying to position yourself based on quality and price, right? Good. Now, beyond quality and price, we can also talk about the use or the user. So lots of brands position themselves based on the kind of usage or users that they are targeting. So for instance, brands like Harley-Davidson are targeting passionate bikers who like to ride long distances for long hours, right? And fall within a particular age group. Currently, we don't have a lot of Harley-Davidson drivers in Ghana, but there are quite a number of them. And because of that, the Harley-Davidson showroom has been opened in Ghana here, where they sell the bikes and they do the servicing as well. Did we know that?
Yes.
Yes.
And they even have a club. I think they have a Harley-Davidson club.
Good.
And they do things from time to time. Yes.
Exactly. Right?
They ride, and just like you said, they do the long distances. So sometimes I was speaking to some of them a couple of weeks ago, and they were talking about how they had ridden from Accra all the way to the north once, and they were talking. Yes, so that it does fit in with the riders, the long distances. But there is a club, and they're slowly growing.
Right. So this is a particular group of people who have a certain use, and that determines the kind of bike that they buy. Right. And for those who are original enthusiasts of Land Rover and Range Rover, they know about the fact that Range Rover and Land Rover are actually were not designed to be town vehicles. They were designed to be off-road luxurious vehicles.
Oh.
Yeah, so people who buy Range Rovers and Land Rovers actually benefit more when they drive them off-road into the mountains, into the towns, over long distance trips. Notice that people abroad usually use it for that purpose, at least the white people. For the black people, it's the status symbol. But that was the original design for the vehicle. So they are very efficient in that regard, right? But for the Ghanaian context, it's more of a luxury vehicle. I'm yet to see someone who drive their Range Rover to their site or to their village. Is there anyone here who owns one and drives it to their village?
Yeah, I mean so.
My guy, don't expose me.
Yeah, then you have the people too who will buy the Toyota Tundra and then the Ford F-150 and drive it in town. These are all off-road, heavy-duty vehicles that are not meant for town ride. Right? And then they'll take up half of the road. And they'll push you off the road. Okay, let's leave it there. Sawe, please go ahead.
I think with these cars and the observations you've made, I think it's kind of like how the iPhone caught on or has caught on in Ghana. You have people who see the real value in the iPhone and are like maybe the users in the US, for example, they see the value, so they buy the phone for the value. And you have the people who are copying because they feel it's a social status symbol now, so they have to show that they can afford it too. So there's that category of people, and I think it's with the cars as well.
Yeah, but actually what you're describing is what we refer to as global consumer culture.
Okay.
Right, which we will discuss more into detail very soon, because right now it has become, like you're saying, the norm. Everybody is copying what is happening around the world. So everybody has an iPhone. I also have to have one, right? So very good observation, Sawe.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Yeah. So aside use or users, we can also talk about competition, right? A lot of brands will position themselves using their competition. They will either directly compare themselves to the competition, or some of them, for legal reasons, will just do implied positioning. So for those who just do implied positioning, you realize that a lot of them would want to portray the attributes that they have. In the event that they are hoping people will compare with their competitors and see that they have things that their competitors don't have. For instance, the Body Shop has always been positioned as a natural brand that does not do animal testing, and they are into recycling, right? But that still has not made it very popular against its huge competitors like Victoria's Secret. In Ghana here, when you compare Victoria's Secret and the Body Shop, Victoria's Secret is on top. Because Ghanaian consumers do not really care about these attributes of natural ingredients and animal testing. They will not ask, right? Likewise, the Pepsi-Coca-Cola rivalry, which is one of the most popular ones in the world at the moment. They are always targeting each other in their adverts and throwing subliminal jabs. Likewise, Burger King and KFC, Burger King and McDonald's, the fast food franchises, they're always at war with each other. So let me show you a typical example of some subliminal jabs that have been thrown between these brands based on positioning along the lines of competition. So look at this advert. Burger King did this advert, and they were trying to subliminally jab another brand. Look at what they said. They said, what? Big Mac seems more like a medium. Which brand do you think they are jabbing? This one is so obvious.
McDonald's.
McDonald's said they have Big Mac, but Burger King is saying that theirs is what? Bigger, meaning that the Big Mac is smaller. This is subliminal. You can't take them to court. Yes. They didn't mention any name. But they are trying to tell the consumer that Big Macs do not compare to the Burger King Whopper. Now, another funny one. This is another good one between Coca-Cola and Pepsi. Everybody knows Coca-Cola's slogan, right? Open happiness, isn't it?
Yes.
So open a Coke, open happiness. Now look at what Pepsi did in reply. They said what? Happiness is a choice. Hashtag just so you know. Is this not a subliminal jab? If it is not, I don't know what is. So Coca-Cola is saying open happiness. SLB is saying happiness is a choice. So you don't have to choose Coca-Cola. Right? And more recently, they have a lot of television ads too that are directly jabbing their competition, both on the part of Coca-Cola and on the part of Pepsi, right? They do it all the time. These are ways by which firms position themselves in relation to the competition to tell the consumers that, look, these people are saying all this and they're promising all that, but that does not mean they are the best, right? As we have seen in the two examples that were just given. All right. Now, apart from competition, we can talk about global, foreign, and local consumer culture, which is currently the key basis by which a lot of firms are positioning their products globally, right? So like I was telling Sawa a few moments ago, a lot of brands will position themselves using what we refer to as global consumer culture positioning. And here they identify their brand as a symbol of a particular global culture. So just like the iPhone, you can see that certain categories of products lend themselves to this global consumer culture, like high-tech products, including the iPhone, right? And high-touch products, like sneakers and makeup, which are both associated with high levels of consumer involvement. And they have a shared language among users. So the iPhone is now part of consumer culture. If you want to be seen as part of the culture of high-tech people who invest in high luxury and of a particular status when it comes to the use of cell phones, then you have to own an iPhone. Likewise, when it comes to the use of products like automobiles, the Range Rover is in a class all its own. It's a part of a certain global consumer cultural group, right? Mercedes-Benzes are the same. Even when it comes to makeup, like I mentioned, we have those who use the high-end makeup brands. Ladies, we know them, don't we?
We sure do.
We do.
We have the drugstore people and the high-end people. They'll never mix.
And you're right. The drugstore people don't understand
exactly
the hype about the high end, and the high end people can't understand why you would use a drugstore brand for your makeup or your beauty.
Exactly. And that is because it's part of global consumer culture. They don't even know why they are so for the high end. But it's a certain cultural group that they want to belong to. So yes, that's what we'll be buying, the high end, right? So this is global consumer cultural positioning, which we see a lot of brands using now. However, aside that, we also have foreign consumer culture positioning, which aside from considering all the markets as one global market, look at specific foreign countries, right? Or specific foreign cultures. For instance, using foreign consumer culture positioning, we can talk about the Americanness of certain car brands. And whenever we talk about a certain car brand being American, what are some of the characteristics we're expecting to see?
Big.
Ford.
Big. Ford is one of them, Elizabeth. Big. What is another characteristic?
Luxury.
Luxury. What's another characteristic? High spec. Thank you, Julian.
High performance.
High performance.
High fuel capacity.
High fuel capacity. Those are the American cars. So we are talking about the GMCs, the Escalades, the Ford F-150s, those huge, loud engines. Thank you, Elikim. When they are coming, you see them. They take up half of the road and they push as the Toyota people to the side. Yes, big money is in Nigeria. Right? Then we have other brands that will go a step further to make it part of the foreign culture by even incorporating characteristics of the culture into the brand, like IKEA. IKEA incorporates the colors of their country of origin into their brand. And the brand itself embodies the culture of their country of origin. So where does IKEA come from?
Sweden.
Sweden, right? And the Swedish flag is predominantly blue and yellow. And Sweden is one of the countries that has a lot of what? Female empowerment, isn't it?
Yes.
Good.
Yes.
And IKEA is all about what? DIY.
Do it yourself, yeah.
Which is empowerment, isn't it? Good.
Yes.
Right? So these are all semblances of foreign consumer culture that you realize a lot of consumers across the globe buy into. I know some people in Ghana who will never buy any car apart from an American car because of the high spec and the luxury. They'll tell you that, oh, when you buy a Toyota, there's nothing in it unless you go into the high-end version of the Toyota. But the American car, as long as it's from America, the specs will all be inside. And that is because of the foreign consumer culture that they subscribe to. However, for those people who are not very exposed to this global consumer culture or foreign consumer culture, they ascribe to what we refer to as the local consumer culture. And for brands that associate with this, they are all about local cultural meanings and their brands reflecting the norms and the values of the local culture from which they originate, or the local culture of the people that they are trying to sell to. So researchers studying television advertising in several countries found that with local consumer culture positioning, there is always a focus on specific product categories, including food and personal non-durables and household non-durables. And in Ghana here, we see this happening all the time. Local consumer culture positioning is what they predominantly use to target the Ghanaian consumer. And because of that, you have almost every popular food or non-durable personal brand that you can think of being represented by local celebrities like Nana Mama Brown, who have the ability to influence the behaviors and choices of the local people. Thank you, Julia. Cheesy pizza, soft cake, Ghana QR code, all of them represented by Nana Mama Brown. Royal Aroma Rice, Tasty Tom, High Sense,
Amalina.
Puff right? Puff Buffruit Mix.
Royal Grain is good. McBerry, Mariaba. In fact, McBerry is her own personal brand, right? All of these contribute to local consumer culture. Right? And these are the various techniques and tools and strategies that global marketers combine when it comes to segmentation, targeting, and positioning. Because like we said, there is nothing like a one-size-fits-all approach. So it's about how well you're able to strategize, knowing what you know about the particular segments and markets that you want to target, so that you can be able to pick which strategy would work in that regard and apply it to achieve results. Kwame, Yaumensa, you said what? Could I touch on big data in marketing and the new trend of data analysts determining the direction of marketing campaigns? Big data is more focused on analyzing consumer trends and behaviors. Now, depending on the source of the data, there are certain characteristics that you can be able to decipher about your consumer base. Now, depending on the consumer base you are targeting, you need to be able to know where to access the specific data that will help you answer your questions. Now, the problem with big data is that everyone is still trying to figure out how to get the best out of big data because of the 5V characteristics of big data, being the speed with which it comes in, the variability of it, right? And the inability of people to be able to analyze the data as fast as it's pouring in. So you realize that people have a lot of data silos that contain huge amounts of data that they are even yet to appreciate at the base or minimum level. Because as they are trying to analyze what they already have, which they have not finished, more data is still pouring in. So the field of data analytics is now booming in terms of researchers and analysts and computer science experts trying to come up with ways and means of analyzing all this data that we have. In the big data discussion is a whole other course in a different program. Right? Currently, I know the business school is in the process of developing courses at the master's level in business analytics in an attempt to train professionals to help solve the big data problem. right? And in terms of habits in all these segments, unless you are able to follow the trend of a particular consumer group with regard to their consumption of certain categories of products and services, you will not be able to determine habit formation and whether it is influencing subsequent decisions and choices. And that once again brings us to big data, because big data contains all this information about consumer purchase choices, their product choices, and the trends with which they do these. And like I mentioned, yeah, it's a whole other course that is being designed at the moment to help people get to the bottom of, yes, attempt, because big data is huge. And like I said, depending on the particular issue you want to focus on, you may have huge amounts of data that you may not even begin to decipher, let alone finish analyzing. Because like I said, big data has 5 characteristics that are categorized based on what we refer to as the 5 Vs. And chief among these is the fact that big data, it comes in so many forms and pours in at such a fast rate that it is impossible to say you finish analyzing big data, because as you are analyzing, more is pouring in. And the information keeps evolving. And depending on the number of sources that you have and the different categories of data that you are collecting, you can have mountains and mountains of data that you cannot even begin to understand. Right? So Kwame, the conversation is still ongoing. It has barely begun, and there's so much we are yet to understand about big data and how we as marketers can be able to benefit from it. So I hope that answers your question. And on that note, we've come to the end of this particular session on the SDP process.